Hello everyone. This video is on animal communication, interspecies communication. How do we connect with our beloved pets or even animals when we're out in nature? How do we receive messages from these beings? And I believe these animals are higher beings. I don't see a hierarchy between humans and animals. It's not humans here, animals here. It's an equality. There is no hierarchy in unity. We all have different physiologies that reflect in different ways what we perceive in the world. So, for instance, snakes, they have an incredible physiology that can reflect amazing higher levels of reality just because their physiology is designed a certain way. And then if you think of bees in hives, how they're collectives, they're not individuals, they're already in a unity state. If you look at ants in a unity state, they're so interconnected in their collective that, say, an anteater comes and it eats some of the worker ants, the intelligence in the collective will notice, oh, 20% of our worker ants have been destroyed, have dropped their bodies, so let's just have a little transformation, and some of the non-worker ants will transform into worker ants, actually have physiological changes in their bodies. Isn't that cool? They can actually morph and change in one life into something else. And when you look at frogs, they begin as tadpoles, then they grow little legs, then they turn into frogs. Look at butterflies, they have many lives in one life, a caterpillar, and then they go into a chrysalis and they break their body down and they come out and fly. And so animal consciousness is very grounded and infused in unity. Whereas human consciousness, for the majority of us, because we get lost in our heads, we're like walking heads. And when you're a walking head, you get disconnected from unity and misunderstand things about the world. And so being able to sense into nature, return back home to who we are unified with everything in our environment, whether we know it or not. Each plant is communicating to us, each animal is communicating to us non-verbally. It's a non-verbal communication. And so if we want to communicate with animals, we return back into a silent meditative space, whether it is an official daily practice of meditation, or we just learn how to connect to stillness. And in that stillness, we may be able to know things about other beings. They may be able to drop messages into that silent field through images, through feelings, through sensations. Here's Chaya, my cat. I have a non-verbal communication with him. And many times I've found him after he's been lost for 30 days. I once went to an animal psychic who told me he was run over by a car and told me to join a grieving group. But then I had a sense, no, he's still alive. So I went into nature, into the environment I thought he might be in. And I went into meditation. And I was in meditation for about a good 2 hours. And I stood up out of my meditation and I heard a meow, and he'd come and he was right there. He could sense, he's here running around. He could sense the stillness. They love stillness. Animals thrive off stillness. And so if you're still, the stillness is a bridge between you and the animal kingdom. If you ever sit in nature and you're still, things will just come out. You become part of the ecosystem. And so if we want to communicate with animals, we return back to being part of an ecosystem, not separate. And there are courses that you can go on to learn how to communicate with animals, but without the ability to drop into stillness, it will be difficult. And also without the ability to open the heart space. And that's why it's wonderful that people have pets, because people who've loved an animal have a heart space that's open to other beings beyond the human species. And they have looked into the eyes of their pet and seen the consciousness that's behind the eyes of their animals as the same consciousness that's behind their eyes. Understand that they are sentient beings with feelings, with the ability to heal humans. I've said this before, but dogs are like walking little angels. They walk their owners around and help them feel good and never judge their owners. They're always there through the thick and the thin, and they're so healing. A lot of loneliness in the world, and we've got a lot of animals that have come into people's lives as guides, as companions. They have contracts with us. Chaya and I definitely have a contract. He places his head on my shoulder at night and he gives me a hug. And then I realize, I think in a past life he was a partner of mine. There is definitely a sense of that this isn't the first time that we've been embodied together. It just so happens that I'm a human and he's a cat. Maybe if I decide to return, it might be the other way round. We're all souls, and I intuit that we can choose what physiology we wish to have an experience of being in. And so you might choose to be an eagle next time. You might choose to be a cat. You might choose to be an ant or a bee if you want to have more of a unified state. Whatever you choose, it's going to be really interesting. And so back to no hierarchy. Having a human physiology is actually quite a tricky one because you're signing up to having a crazy head. Human monkeys get lost in their heads, so it's not easy. It's not a, a light decision to come into a human physiology. If we want to have an easier time of it, we're probably more likely to go into an eagle's physiology or into a cat's physiology or into something which is really, really connected and doesn't get swept up in its head. So I really have to say thank you. Thank you to every human out there that has decided to have a human experience. That's not easy. It's often like talked about that, oh, we're so lucky to have a human physiology and we reincarnated many times. First we were a worm and then we worked ourselves up to have the human physiology. Like it's the crescendo of all physiologies. No, I think that's pretty tough. Humans have a hard time reconnecting with stillness in this digital age, in this robotic age where we're so disconnected from nature. And we don't really know what we're missing. The experience of being a cat that has access to so many realms that humans have lost contact with. They were worshipped in Egypt for a reason. They demand respect. Anyone who's loved a cat and communicated with a cat understands they demand of you respect for who they are as a higher being. And so if you're not able to see them for the higher beings that they are, they don't like that. They get quite moody and dysregulated and irritable and aggressive and depressed. Cats really need you to recognize their divinity, to understand that you are with a God. God in the form of a cat. And they are just so beautiful. I mean, humans, are they really beautiful? I mean, if you're in heaven or you've dropped your body and you want to take a human physiology, why? I mean, you're not going to say, oh, those human monkeys are really good looking. I want to take a human body. Nah. Cats! Well, all animals are beautiful in their own way, but I just wanted to open people's minds and allow us to celebrate all forms of life and not just focus on putting humans on a pedestal. We are moving into a new age of interspecies communication. And once we learn to reconnect with animals and plants, we will receive downloads that will help humanity, that can save humanity, because they are so altruistic and they want to help us. They are so beautiful. We destroy the environment. We don't see the animals for the divine beings they are, but they still embody, they still give up their bodies to us to consume. They still come into our earthly experience so we can have an easier time. They're so giving, they're so loving, they're so divine. They're so self-sacrificial. Imagine there's a higher being. It doesn't have to embody. It can stay in another realm. But it chooses to embody as a pet for somebody who's lonely, or as a plant to feed some human, or as a bee to create honey that heals humans. And the buzzing of the bees vibrates and affects so much in the world. A buzzing of a bee colony is felt throughout the whole universe. Vibrations are so powerful. Vibrations have the power to heal. Sanskrit, and I'll do some videos on that later, is divine vibration that can upgrade human physiologies. These are primordial sounds that have effects on our nervous system, that come from nature, that get downloaded by some seers of reality when they're in nature. Where do mantras come from? They don't come from humans. They come from plants. They come from animals. Nobody talks about that. We celebrate the gurus as if they came up with them. But no, the gurus went into nature. The shamans went into nature and they learned to communicate with the plants and the animals, became silent, heard vibrations, and then verbalized those vibrations into sounds. But they don't belong to humans. That's one way that animals communicate with humans. That's one way that plants communicate with humans. A lot of the technology to reduce stress is non-human. So if we start to learn to communicate with other beings, then we might get new technologies so that we're less stressed, so that we can evolve and we can move to a new platform of awareness, which is essential for the survival of the human species. And so, are there any blocks to loving animals? Maybe you don't have an experience of loving an animal, and that's okay. But really, take your time to look into animals' eyes. Take your time to watch nature documentaries. Just be open to it, because they're not just there to be eaten or to look pretty or to destroy, to make way for freeways. They're there to upgrade our consciousness. They're there to take away our suffering. So we shouldn't just overlook them. And I will do more on animal communication. It's such a huge subject. It's very, very valuable. It's timely. May we all see the divinity in beings other than humans. Realize that the consciousness that's behind their eyes is the same consciousness that is behind our eyes. May we learn to enter stillness and open our heart space so that we may receive technology and upgrades from nature. May we heal the planet. May we save the environment. May we open up our heart space and return back to calm.